A Great Argead Saga Alexine, Alexander the Great. Volume 2, Hieros Lachus, The Sacred Band. By Macaulay Naki. Episode 14, Epirus, Echoes of the Oracle. Council of Passaron. The cold November rain hammered incessantly against the massive bronze-studded doors of the War Council chamber in Passaron, the ancestral heart of the Molossian kingdom. Inside, beneath the vaulted timber roof, hung with faded battle banners and captured spoils, the air was thick with the scent of burning olive oil, wet wool, and simmering anxiety. King Neoptolemus I sat rigidly upon his carved oak throne, his brow furrowed as he stared down at a grease-stained intelligence map spread across the central marble table. Beside him sat his younger brother and co-ruler, King Arybbas, whose youthful fingers nervously traced the hilt of his ceremonial dagger. Standing just off their right shoulder was General Lycomedes, his scarred face hardened by decades of border skirmishes, while Queen Andromache stood near the arched, unglazed window, watching the storm clouds roll heavily over the Dodona ridges. The shadow of the northern crisis hung over the chamber like a physical weight. The reports were no longer mere rumors carried by frightened merchants. The Dardanian juggernaut was fully awake. King Bardylis had successfully unified the disparate southern Illyrian and Dardanian tribes, locking his iron grip over Upper Macedonia and the strategic lakeland corridors of Lyncestia. Worse still, the steady, unyielding wealth pouring from the silver mines of Damastion was funding an unprecedented standing force of elite Dardanian shock infantry, turning a loose confederation of mountain raiders into an unstoppable military machine that held neighboring minor kingdoms in absolute vassalage. The latest dispatches from our scouts on the northern border confirmed the worst. General Lycomedes broke the tense silence, his deep voice gravelly as he tossed a heavy lead seal onto the table. Bardylis has not merely raided the frontier. He has swallowed Lyncestia whole. The mountain passes that once served as our shield are now choked with Dardanian pikes. And they are not paying their warriors with plunder anymore. Damastion's mints are pumping out silver tetradrachms day and night, buying a permanent professional spear wall. King Neoptolemus clenched his jaw, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the arms of his throne. We have wasted precious months bickering over pasture rights and southern alliances, with Athens and Thebes, Neoptolemus thought, a cold knot tightening in his chest. While we watched the Greek mainland, Bardylis forged an empire of iron and silver right in our backyard. If he breaks the Macedonian defenses completely, Epirus will be the next dish on his table. Our mountain passes cannot hold against a unified northern host, backed by endless bullion. Young King Arybbas leaned forward, his eyes darting across the map to the vulnerable northern approaches. My brother thinks we can weather the storm by simply calling up our tribal levies and hiding behind our hill forts, Arybbas mused internally, a bead of cold sweat tracing down his temple. He doesn't understand that Bardylis is not like the petty chieftains of our past. The Dardanians fight as a disciplined phalanx now, funded by royal silver and commanded by veterans. If we do not act, our kingdom will be crushed between the Illyrian hammer and the Theban-dominated south. We cannot meet them with divided forces or half-hearted tribal levies, Arybbas spoke up, his voice ringing with a sharp, urgent clarity that caught Neoptolemus off guard. If Bardylis has secured the lakeland corridors and turned his shock infantry south toward Pella, our entire western flank is exposed. We must mobilize every clan from the Ambracian Gulf to the Chaonian Mountains before the spring thaw opens the roads. Queen Andromache turned slowly away from the stormy window, her expression calm, razor-sharp, and unyielding, though the heavy, pronounced swell of her advanced pregnancy made her movements deliberate and measured. A quiet reminder that the royal bloodline was standing at the very precipice of a new generation. She stepped gracefully toward the council table, her commanding presence instantly silencing the room. The men look only at the immediate border, blind to the grander board. Andromache thought, resting a pale, steady hand against the edge of the oak table near the map, feeling the faint, rhythmic stirring of the child within her. Bardylis is not just marching for plunder. He is reshaping the balance of power from the Adriatic to the Aegean. If Pella falls to the Dardanians, our alliances in Greece crumble into dust. We cannot afford to wait for Perdiccas to lose his throne, nor can I afford to let the birth of an heir be overshadowed by the ash of our burning cities. My husband speaks of defense, and my brother speaks of mobilization. Andromache said, her voice dropping into a register of absolute authority that seemed to steady the very air in the chamber. Both are necessary, but both will fail if we do not understand the enemy's true weapon. Bardylis is not conquering with mere numbers, he is conquering with silver and logistics. Every Dardanian spearman is paid from the vaults of Damastion. If we wish to survive this shift in the north, we must stop looking backward at our old feuds and send envoys to every court from Athens to Sparta. We need a united Greek coalition, or the northern barbarians will write the next chapter of our history in our own blood. General Lycomedes nodded slowly, a grim respect dawning in his eyes. The Queen speaks truth, your majesties? If the Dardanian advance shifts fully toward our borders, a divided Epirus will fall in a single campaign. King Neoptolemus looked from his general to his sharp-witted queen, then to his brother, finally exhaling a long, heavy breath as he surrendered his doubt to the grim reality of the hour. The heavy oak door of the inner chamber swung open with a quiet, unoiled creak, cutting through the dense silence that had settled after Neoptolemus departed. King Arybbas remained standing by the high, narrow window, the cold November rain still blurring the distant hills, his mind violently pulled back from the council table to the dark, suffocating gloom of the oracle at Dodona. The prophecy still burns in my veins like unquenched lime, Arybbas thought, his fingers tightening until his knuckles turned wide against the stone sill. I can still hear the rustle of the sacred oak leaves and the rattling bronze basins in the dark. I hid it from Neoptolemus. Why burden my aging brother with a doom he has neither the time nor the strength to fight? He coughs blood in the damp nights. He could cross to the other side sooner rather than later. And when he does, what state of the kingdom will I inherit? A scorched wasteland trampled by Bardylis's iron-shod phalanxes? His mind raced back to the wild, chilling words of the priest beneath the ancient canopy. The boy. Philip. The leaves gathered around his name are choked with thorns, a blade being sharpened on a Theban whetstone. If he lives, he will not just stop the Illyrians, he will remake the world in his image. Remake the world in his image? Arybbas mused bitterly, a cold shiver running down his spine, despite the warm oil lamps guttering in the corners. If Philip survives his golden cage in Thebes, if Epaminondas's diplomacy and Pelopidas is watchful, I forge that young Macedonian hostage into a weapon, he will not stop at pushing Bardylis back across the Axios. A man shaped in Thebes and born to the Argead bloodline will crush every crown between the Danube and the Peloponnese. Does that mean Philip will rule all of Greece? And what becomes of Epirus, a loyal ally swallowed whole, or a vassal state kneeling in the dust before a boy who learned war from the greatest captains of our age? A soft, hesitant rap at the heavy door interrupted his dark reverie. Enter, Arybbas commanded, forcing the haunting echoes of Dodona back into the deep recesses of his mind as he turned away from the window. The door pushed fully open, revealing Troas. Arybbas paused, a momentary breath catching in his throat. In the warm, flickering amber light of the torch bracket, he was struck once again by how much she had grown. The awkward, quiet girl of a few seasons past had blossomed into a striking young woman, her poise and grace carrying an innate, regal dignity that matched the blood of the Molossian kings, even as her eyes retained a youthful, stubborn spark of defiance. She has grown so beautifully, Arybbas thought, a complex wave of paternal affection, dynastic duty, and a quiet, aching longing washing over him. She is the living heart of our house, yet I am bound to her by the archaic, unyielding laws of our bloodline. According to the dynastic customs designed to keep the royal inheritance sealed within the royal house, Troas was promised in marriage to her uncle, Arybbas himself. Yet whenever the delicate subject of the wedding was raised, she would tilt her chin with an amused, unyielding smile and say simply, "Wait for a few years, uncle. Let me grow into the crown before you saddle me with it." Troas stepped into the chamber, her dark woolen cloak damp from the storm, holding a fresh batch of intelligence dispatches from the southern passes. "The couriers have just arrived from Ambracia, my lord," Troas began, her voice steady and rich with a maturity that always astonished him. She noticed the dark shadows under his eyes and paused, stepping closer with a perceptive frown. "You look as though you have been staring down into the underworld again, Arybbas." Is the shadow from the north truly that dark? Arybbas offered a thin, tired smile, walking slowly toward her across the stone floor. The north is burning, Doas, and the world we know is shifting beneath our feet, Arybbas replied softly, reaching out to gently touch the edge of her cloak. Bardylis has forged an empire of silver and iron, and secret prophecies whisper that even greater storms are brewing far to the east in the cage of Thebes. Troas held his gaze, her expression softening with an affectionate, steady warmth that temporarily chased the ghosts of Dodona away. Let Bardylis bring his silver, and let Thebes keep its cages, Troas said, a fierce, spirited defiance flashing in her eyes. Epirus has survived before, and we will survive now. But you must stop carrying the weight of the entire world on your shoulders alone. Eat, rest, and let the future wait until tomorrow. Echoes of the Oracle. The War Council Chamber, Court of Passaron, Kingdom of Molossian, Epirus. A cold northern wind of November swept over the jagged peaks of the Pindus mountains. The autumn of Epirus was merciless, turning the vast beech forests of Dodona into a sea of withered leaves and seeping a damp chill into the raw stone walls of Passaron. Within the chamber's hearth, beech logs popped and exploded with sharp cracks, as dark red flames cast long shadows of sorrow across the geopolitical maps scattered over the massive table. At the center of this war council room, standing erect upon a massive, long-furred bear skin, was younger daughter Polyxena. Firmly gripped in her taut, boyish right hand was a scaled-down long spear. It was no mere child's toy, but a steadfast symbol of absolute purpose, engineered to execute the highest national interest. Father, there are matters I must hear and confirm. Polyxena's low, clear voice, ringing like a bell yet strangely mature, pierced the minds of the men occupying the space around the large oak table. King Neoptolemus, seated at the head of the table, shifted the lines of severe exhaustion etched into his face, and looked back into his daughter's piercing eyes. What is it? The third son of Macedonia, Philip? He has been sent to Thebes, has he not? Answering with immediate tactical precision, General Lycomedes, the old commander standing directly beside the king, projected a voice carrying the heavy resonance of iron from the depths of his thick chest. Prince Philip has already arrived in Thebes, alongside 67 other high-born hostages. Word has reached us that with the arrival of this autumn, their rigorous education and training in that city have officially commenced. Denying herself even a single fraction of a blink, Polyxena held the line of her intellectual gaze perfectly locked onto the depths of her father's eyes as she continued her equation of words. There are two distinct objectives behind Philip's banishment to Thebes, are there not? The first is a defensive pact. By delivering these high-ranking children as hostages to Thebes, Macedonia secures a treaty to guard its borders from the surrounding barbarians. The second is to forge Philip and the other youths through the latest Theban education and training, breeding them into future generals and statesmen. Queen Andromache, leaning heavily against her couch, let out a deep, labored breath. Her grand pregnancy had reached its full term, leaving her on the very brink of the dramatic threshold of childbirth. Her abdomen, swelling greatly beneath layers of heavy fabric, radiated an intense heat, holding the entire future of the mountain kingdom. The queen faintly parted her thin lips, listening intently to her younger daughter's terrifyingly precocious insight. Polyxena tightened her grip on the miniature spear, using its lethal tip to point toward the northern sector of the map. For Thebes, Macedonia is the linchpin of the northern territories. If Macedonia falls under the dominion of the neighboring barbarians, those savage tribes will multiply their strength, inevitably invading Thessaly and plunging into the very heart of Greece. Will you teach me of these northern territories, including the Illyrians? Our kingdom of Epirus is perpetually harassed by these exact same barbarians, just like Macedonia, is it not? Emerging from the shadows of the background with cold, measured footsteps was the eldest daughter, Princess Troas. Already being integrated into the rigid framework of dynastic matchmaking, her face was marked by a flickering blend of frightened reproach and harsh realism. Polyxena, how dare you speak with such reckless audacity? To encroach so deeply into the core of state military affairs at a mere 7 years old. Yet, King Neoptolemus stripped the mask of severity from his stern countenance, allowing a rare smile of fatherly bliss to touch the corners of his lips. You speak with perfect accuracy, my clever daughter, the king shouted, standing up abruptly from his high seat. He looked down at the map on the great table and arrogantly thrust his powerful arm toward the northern borders Polyxena had targeted. Listen well, Polyxena, and you as well, Troas. The calculation you have seen through is flawless, without a single fraction of error. This royal house of Epirus, our Yacid line, is the legitimate direct lineage of Achilles, the half-god son of almighty Zeus. And the Argead royal house of neighboring Macedonia is the lineage of Heracles, also a son of Zeus. The blood of our Bardylis race is fundamentally distinct from the essence of those barbarians, the Illyrians, Paeonians, and Thracians, who writhe beyond our borders. Born with the divine embers of the gods pulsing through their veins, the Bardylis are destined by nature to command and govern common men, and the entire earth through their supreme intellect and overwhelming martial virtue. Tracing the neatly aligned borderlines on the map, the father began to break down the cold architecture of international relations. But the legitimacy of mythic blood alone cannot force the world to bow. Currently, Macedonia is decaying from within, stained by dynastic bloodshed following the death of King Amyntas. The regent Ptolemy is a venomous serpent, manipulating the young king through treacherous machinations. Their state sovereignty is on the precipice of collapse. Because of this, they were forced to surrender 68 of their highest-ranking children, including Philip, to Thebes as hostages. It is a desperate defensive contract designed to have the supreme military of Thebes bolster Macedonia from the shadows as a fortress against the savage wolves of Illyria. If Macedonia crumbles, the Illyrian tempest will devour Thessaly and pour into the heart of Hellas, exactly as you predicted. And our Epirus, too, sits at the westernmost edge, its physical territory continuously overrun and torn by those same fierce Illyrian fangs. The current alignment between us and Macedonia is a volatile balance. Though torn apart by massive mountain ranges, we are bound by a single thread of destiny to eventually unite against this common, fatal disease of barbarism. Queen Andromache, cradling her abdomen as if to protect the sovereign life within, joined the conversation, her voice sharpened like an icy blade. In name, both Epirus and Macedonia are supreme sovereigns carrying the blood of gods. Yet our power is perpetually suffocated from within by the ambitions of your uncle Arybbas and the suspicion of the court, and from without by the spears of barbarians. My husband, is it impossible for our Bardylis blood to dominate this world through raw force alone? A deep shadow of calculation crossed Neoptolemus I's eyes. He shook his head slowly, fixing his daughters and the queen with a piercing gaze. The power of our Bardylis lineage can maintain absolute order within our own domains. But that power does not translate identically onto the international stage. In the grand arena of Hellas where force collides with force, the mathematics of geopolitics are not so naive as to crown a victor based on mythic bloodlines alone, and the ultimate master currently ruling the entirety of Greece is neither Thebes, which shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility, nor Athens, which once boasted its golden empire of the sea. The king paused, letting an absolute silent weight fill the council room. Polyxena's gray-green eyes widened to their absolute limit, intent on seizing her father's next words. It is the Pythia, the oracle of Delphi, who delivers prophecies as the vocal instrument of Apollo, the crown jewel of Greece. The oracle of Delphi, Troas gasped, while Polyxena mentally rehearsed the resonance of the name within her mind. Indeed, Neoptolemus, I said, his features tightening into a stern, geometric expression. If our ancient oracle of Dodona is the primeval source of Hellas, the modern Delphi is the supreme seat of sovereignty, river engineering, and governing the wealth and political structure of the entire world. No matter how powerful a nation's hoplites may be, no matter how sacred its lineage, every state is strictly dictated in its every movement and military initiation by the formulas of the Delphic oracles. The true driving force that scans the future and commands the structure of the world resides in that invisible abyss beneath the altar of prophecy. Polyxena, if you ever wish to seize the entirety of this world within your palm and reign as a true ruler, you must never lose your mind to the raw mass of muscle or the heat of mere bravery. You must embed the geometry of prophecy, the power to look into the future, into your very flesh and blood. Holding her ground, a cruel and beautiful smile flashed at the corners of Polyxena's lips. Outside the window, a cold autumn gale howled through the Pindus mountains, while the immutable formulas of destiny destined to shatter the old world into piecework began to silently solidify in the depths of the dark. Is that oracle of Delphi, the Pythia, a half-god of the lineage of Zeus, a Bardylis like us? Polyxena's question sliced through the stagnant weight of the war room like a razor-sharp blade. Her gray-green eyes burned with an intense intellectual hunger, desperate to immediately dismantle the core of global power. Looking down from his high position, her father, King Neoptolemus I, shook his head slowly, his face frozen like a cold geometric proof. The Pythia does not belong to a half-god lineage. She does not carry the blood of the gods within her veins as the kings of the earth do. They are a collective of priestesses harvested from every city and village across Hellas, possessing a rare, supreme talent, capable of pure communication with the divine. She is merely a sacrificial vessel, engineered to perfectly confine and manifest the maddening divine aura of Apollo within the cage of a single virginal body. Hearing of this eerie, divine anatomy, the eldest daughter, Princess Troas, turned a frightened glance toward her father, her voice falling to a hushed whisper. How did it begin? The priestesses of Apollo and the origin of Delphi, through what equation did they manifest upon the earth? The king placed his fingertip upon the map, targeting the coordinates of Delphi situated on the steep slopes of Mount Parnassus. Delphi is the holy abyss considered the center of the world, the omphalos, the navel of the earth. In ancient times, it was the domain of Gaia, the primordial earth mother, fiercely guarded by Python, the colossal serpent. But Apollo, the god of light, descended from the heavens and with his invincible arrows blasted the serpent into absolute ruin, completely usurping sovereign dominion over the chasm. The vapor rising from the cleft where the god subdued the serpent, that is the source of illumination that deranges the minds of the priestesses, allowing them to river engineer and see through the future. The king paused, leaning forward and pressing both hands forcefully against the heavy oak table. Therefore, Delphi remains the absolute focal point of all Hellas. Every nation continuously tracks the shadows of its rivals, desperate to control Delphi and the oracle voice of Apollo. Already, 2 sacred wars have been fought over that Delphic oracle, the crown jewel of Greece, chasing the overwhelming influence and the vast wealth accumulated within its temple vaults. Troas gasped at the full scope of this blood-drenched history, glancing in sudden realization at her sister Polyxena, before fearfully peering back at her father's face. Then, father, does the nation that controls Delphi become, in both name and deed, the absolute master of all Greece? Precisely, Troas? Nay, it is far more than that, Neoptolemus I declared, his voice carrying a fiercely brilliant clarity. To subdue other nations through the mere mass of muscle, or sheer numbers, is nothing but the mindless game of Ares. If you can completely control and distribute the oracle formulas of Apollo for your own national interest, all of Greece will obey that voice as immutable law. To neutralize the enemy's initiation before they can even draw a blade, that is the true power on this earth, the invisible, supreme sovereignty, the divine voice that subdues men. Polyxena gripped her miniature spear tightly, chewing upon the calculations of destiny flowing beneath her own name, a cruel and beautiful smile playing upon her lips. In that precise instant, from within the body of Queen Andromache, who had maintained a silent, absolute resilience upon her couch, came a deep, heavy rupture, the physical signal that her anatomy had reached its ultimate limit. From beneath the layers of her heavy robes, the smooth amniotic fluid, like the tears of the earth, instantly gushed forth, staining the bare skin black. Neoptolemus, my water has broken. The moan that escaped Queen Andromache's lips was a low, agonized grunt, like a taut iron wire snapping. In that fraction of a second, the cold geometry of the War Council room, previously frozen in strategy, melted entirely, reversing into a state of fierce, chaotic urgency. Summon the midwives and the physician. Instantly, hurry! The roar of King Neoptolemus I echoed violently against the stone walls. General Lycomedes ran down the dark corridor, his leather armor scraping harshly, while stewards and palace slaves began to scramble in a frantic panic like bees from a disrupted hive, rushing to boil water and gather clean linens. Andromache's body was immediately lifted by the rough, powerful hands of the men and transported into the adjoining bedchamber. Presently, 3 elderly midwives arrived, carrying a sharp medicinal aroma, of herbs as they slipped into the room. The heavy oak doors of the bedchamber were closed completely from within, with a low, rumbling thud, followed by the metallic click of an iron bar dropping into place. The world and the bedchamber were perfectly bifurcated, leaving the birth room an absolute sanctuary, where life and death were to engage in mortal combat. Standing before the closed doors, his shoulders still heaving heavily, the king turned a severe, unyielding gaze upon his two remaining daughters. "Go to your chambers and wait quietly. This is no place for men nor for young children." In the face of this absolute decree, the eldest Troas bowed her head deeply with an expression mixed with fear and relief. But 7-year-old Polyxena did not retreat a single step. Instead, she drove her small long spear firmly into the floor with her taut right hand, fixing her burning gray-green eyes directly into the depths of her father's mind. "My father, I want to stand witness to my mother's labor." "Polyxena!" Troas gasped in horror at her sister's unprecedented insolence, seizing her slender shoulder. "Listen to our father. Childbirth is a sacred, gruesome combat of blood and life. It is no spectacle for a child. Unhand me, sister." Polyxena cold-bloodedly flung Troas's hand aside, her voice vibrating with a razor-sharp conviction that entirely exploded the cage of an ordinary child's maturity. "Sister, we are women destined to one day marry into foreign lands and bring forth the children of kings. Did father and mother not just declare that we are not to become mere puppets, weak queen consorts who do nothing but flaunt beautiful garments atop a throne? If that is our truth, then is this not the highest, most supreme lesson for a woman of the Basileus? One who is destined to one day harbor the entire fate of empire within her womb and force a legitimate new bloodline onto this earth." Every single word delivered by the girl froze into the very causal law of this unrefined court, without a single fracture of doubt. She marched directly up to the king, her father, looking up at his powerful chest with the ravenous gaze of a hungry young wolf. "Father, so that I may one day bring forth from my womb the supreme master who will completely subdue the entire structure of the world, permit me to dissect and absorb this ultimate threshold with my own extraordinary eyes, to watch my mother risk her life to fashion a new existence and force it into this world. I harbor not a single molecule of fear. As an absolute destiny our acid blood must execute. Command me to march through those doors, father." Every line of sternness melted once more from the face of King Neoptolemus I. In its place broke a fierce smile of supreme fatherly pride and an intoxicating awe at the monstrous capacity manifested by his daughter. Outside the window, a cold autumn thunder crashed, shaking the Pindus mountains, while from behind the heavy doors, the agonizing yet ferocious roar of the queen began to echo, as if proclaiming the birth of a new era. To be continued in episode 15. Thessaly Rise of Alexandra Ferry. Watch and listen now. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Talesia's Playlist. Volume 2, Hieros Lachus, the Sacred Band Playlist. Bookmark Volume 1, Divine Oracle Playlist. Join the Vanguard. A new episode drops every single day until the epic conclusion of Volume 2. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, perfect for your daily plunge into antiquity. Subscribe to follow the bloody rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our Vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below.